Hey everyone, Maize here, bringing you something a little different today. I want to highlight the CBGM League that's being run by GM Games, a premier sim college basketball league being run off Draft Day Sports College Basketball 2021. Right now, there are 126 active teams in the league as of the time of recording. A very active league, a ton of fun, and an opportunity to really highlight what makes Draft Day Sports College Basketball 2021 so much fun. In that league, I manage Cleveland State, Minnesota, and DePaul. This is separate from my DePaul dynasty, Waking the Sleeping Demon. That's separate from the DePaul team that I run in CBGM. But this year, I wanted to take on a different challenge from what I had last year. So last season, I only had Minnesota and DePaul. And in the offseason, I added Cleveland State. And Cleveland State, I believe, is the toughest rebuild in CBGM. I know that's a big statement, but I think with what I'm about to go through, it's going to back it up. So this is something I probably won't do too often, but I occasionally want to give you updates on Cleveland State because I think it is such an interesting rebuild. I also, it will give me an opportunity to talk about the CBGM League as a whole. So in this episode, I want to focus on Cleveland State, but then I'm also going to give just a quick preview of the Horizon League. Also, shouts to the managers in the Horizon League. I'd love to get a few more in here. I think there's 4 of us right now. I'd love to get that number up. Those are rookie numbers. We got to get those up. As I said, I think this is the toughest rebuild in the country because Cleveland State last year was by far the worst team in college basketball in CBGM. So let's look at last year's team. Overall, Cleveland State was 4-26. 3 of those 4 wins came in conference play, although a 3-17 record in conference play still put them in the basement of the Horizon League. Their net ranking was 357th, which is dead last, and their net rating was negative 19.5. So that's the difference of your offensive rating versus your defensive rating per 100 possessions. Cleveland State's was negative 19.5, dead last. So this is, it's not even close. This was the worst team in CBGM in year 1. The Vikings had the fewest wins in the country, including no road wins. Some of the bad teams last year won at least 5 games. This was the only team to win less than 5 games. We were the worst rebounding team with only 26 per game. That's dead last, and actually about a full rebound and a half from the team that's in second to last. This is also the 3rd worst offensive team by offensive rating, an 88.5 offensive rating, incredibly low. Some other stats that just kind of highlight how bad this really was for the Vikings. Some stats in which they were bottom 10 in the country. Less than 30% three-point shooting team, less than 3 blocks per game, and only 63.2 points per game on average. Those are just awful numbers and just show that this was a team that was offensively challenged, but also not a very active team, not active on the boards, didn't get a lot of blocks, not a good defensive team. And you see that in the next rating, defensive rating, 108 on the dot. That's bottom 20 in the country. So when you have the 3rd worst offensive rating, a bottom 20 defensive rating, you end up with by far the worst team by any metric last year. If you just want to look eye test, no doubt. You want to look at the analytics. I think it speaks for itself. So last year, while the team was bad, what is compounding and making this rebuild even tougher is Cleveland State lost 4 of its top 6 players. They lost 3 starters, their starting center and their starting backcourt. Those 3 were 3 of the top 4 scorers on the team. So of the 63.2 points per game, what is lost, what's leaving is 31.4 points per game. So almost 50% of the offense is gone. Now, of course, I say it at the top, it's roster loss, but can you even call it a loss when it was such a bad team? Maybe, a completely new scheme, completely new style, getting some fresh faces out there. Maybe that makes a difference because this was such a bad team last year. But also we're having to replace players that made a real impact last year. So if you look at the pie, the player impact estimate, what was lost is 38.8% of the team's overall pie. 40% of their overall production is gone. Cleveland State lost their best rebounder, their best shooter, and their best scorer, all 3 out the door. Including another player who was, one of their better bench players, but the 3 starters are the big loss. So what about what's coming back? Is there any meat on that bone? We do get 2 starters back, so I want to highlight them before I talk a bit about the rest of the roster. So we have a new coach, David Jordan, no relation to Jordan David, the head coach of the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Vikings coach David Jordan, we're going to bring in a new culture. Looking at the starters that are returning, we have a senior, and actually the three best players on the roster right now are all seniors. So you see all three of them listed here. They're all going to be starters this year. That's tough. When you're trying to build something and you're still relying on guys who are only going to give you 1 year, that makes it difficult. It does give us an opportunity to, have some players that can provide some stability for this year while we figure out the rest of the roster. The guy that's going to be leading the way, by far the best player on the team, is David Thompson. Started every game last year. You can see that shooting splits are bad, but this was a guy that was one of our better rebounders. I know 3.4 rebounds per game seems weak, but given the position, that's actually pretty good. He's our best returning scorer at 8.4 points per game. But overall, takes care of the basketball well and just kind of one of those do everything combo forwards. He's going to play a lot at the three. So Leighton Morant is a sophomore coming off a very good freshman season in which he started every game and went 6-4. He wants to shoot, but that part of his game is not there yet. But you can see he's a pretty good free throw shooter, 71% from the line. So I think there's an opportunity where he can develop as a shooter. I think the shot is there. They're just not falling yet. But we're going to still give him opportunities to work through that this season. He ended up being one of our more efficient scorers on the team, but is probably our best defender. So Leighton Morant is someone that we're really going to rely on defensively. And then we'll give him some touches offensively to keep him engaged. But I still see that part of his game developing, and it's definitely coming along slower than his defensive game. As for the two new starters, they were both rotation pieces. Last year, you have senior Cleveland State's Cleveland Sinville. The point guard played 15 minutes a game last year, gave 4 points, basically an even assist to turnover ratio, was good for 2 assists a game and 2 turnovers per game, but is by far the best offensive player we have. In his limited minutes, he gave Cleveland State actually some pretty good offense, 37% from 3-point range. That seems really bad, but on this team, oh no, that's basically Klay Thompson. 68% from the free throw line, so that's a little worrisome because he is someone that is going to get fouled because he likes to drive to the basket. He's a little undersized, so he's not afraid of contact, but I'd like to see that free throw number increase because I think his attempts are going to increase this year. Now that he's going to be getting starter minutes. And as for the other starter, he was our 6th man last year, Higgins Boyd. He played in every game, averaged 6 points, 3 rebounds, and over a steal per game. Again, shooting numbers are horrendous, but that's just kind of par for the course. This was a bad offensive team last year. But what we like about Higgins Boyd is that he's a big guard, someone that we can probably play in 3-guard lineups and could guard other teams' 3. So because of that, it gives us an opportunity to extend the rotation a bit because we can play Higgins Boyd close to starter minutes, but he gives us some versatility to play some different lineups and play him with different pieces. So David Thompson, definitely the best player. I'm most excited about Leighton Morant, maybe a year or maybe even 2 seasons from now. But the player I think at the end of the day will be our best player and statistically will be the best is going to be Cleveland Sinville, at least offensively. Defensively, we have to hide him a bit, but excited about what he can do on offense. As for the other starting spot at center, we're going to have 2 freshmen that are going to split minutes. And this is a very interesting situation given how Cleveland State recruited last year. So I did not recruit for Cleveland State. So when I came in, they had already recruited 3 players to the 3 scholarship spots that they had. The 2 best players were both 1-stars from the state of Ohio, and they were both centers. So it gives us an opportunity to really let them split minutes and see who is the better player. I think this year that player is going to be Kenny Johnson. He comes in a little more ready for the college level. But in the long term, I'm really excited about Garrett Braswell. Both have some ability to score inside, although Garrett Braswell has the jump shot that I think is going to still develop. He's more of a raw prospect. He needs to earn some minutes. So Kenny Johnson is likely to start, but Braswell is going to play quite a bit because he can play the 4 and 5. He's a very good athlete, has a ton of potential. I want to see how the 2 of them play together. If maybe there's an opportunity in the future where they can be starters going forward. If not, I want to find out which one of these guys should be earning starter minutes next year. So really this first year is a year 0 for Cleveland State. And you've probably heard that term before where, it's not even year 1 of a rebuild where you have some pieces, things are, being put together. We're still in a bit of a deficit because we have seniors on this roster we have to rely on. We want to figure out what the younger players are. We want to figure out what it's going to take for us to win games and be successful. So we're really just going to be tinkering all year. I'm going to really start to focus on, what can I do to make this team better game by game? I don't want to over tinker and do too much, but I want players to earn minutes. So you're likely to see 10 players earn 10 plus minutes per game. I'm going to play the seniors, their starter minutes, but I'm going to limit it. You're not going to see anyone earn major minutes on this team. I would be surprised if you have anyone over 30 plus minutes per game on average. And it's because this roster is young, but the talent is old. So we have to kind of balance those two things against each other. One of the sophomores is a transfer, so he's redshirted. One of our freshmen are redshirted. So next year, this is going to continue to be a very young team. The thing that we're struggling with right now, and I'll highlight this on other episodes in the future, is recruiting. I want to see what we can bring in because we have scholarships available, but I'm already thinking we may have a scholarship available for the transfer portal in the offseason because I'm not sure we're going to be able to snag 3 scholarship players in this cycle. Recruiting at Cleveland State, especially coming off the year that they had, is incredibly difficult. There's access to talent in the Midwest, especially in the state of Ohio, but I think it's going to take this team getting a little better, and it's going to take a few seasons before we really can play in even a regional level as a recruiting power. Right now, we're just not there. So I think we may strike out. It looks like we're probably going to strike out on a few of our top targets in recruiting, which means we'll probably have a scholarship, maybe even 2 available in the offseason. All right, now I want to highlight the Horizon League, a 12-team league, and I think one of the more interesting leagues in the country because, as you can see, it looks like every team is going to be pretty competitive. You had a lot of teams finish right around 500. I think that could continue this year. For the teams that were bad last year, Purdue, Fort Wayne, Milwaukee, and Cleveland State, they're going to be better this year than they were last year. I think that's easy to say. So because of that, the floor is a little closer to the ceiling in the Horizon League. And the ceiling, you don't know. There's so much parity in this league. So I want to just quickly run through what I think are going to be the standings at the end of the year, 1 through 12 in the Horizon League. Basically, if this was media day, this is where I think the coaches poll would land. And it starts up top with a user team, Green Bay. Green Bay was 20-11 last year that made the NIT. They returned 3 starters, a very strong backcourt, overall a pretty good rotation as well, at least by Horizon League standards. Everything I'm going to say, you have to kind of have through the lens of the Horizon League. Green Bay, coming off a good year, returning their best players. That backcourt, I think, will keep them in a lot of games. I think offensively, they're pretty good. Defensively, they found themselves in some shootouts that they lost last year, including in the NIT tournament and later in the year. I still think this is a pretty good team, and I think is the favorite right now, given what they return, especially in the backcourt. Number 2, Illinois Chicago. They were 17-15 last year, made the CBI tournament. They returned 3 starters, but this is an older roster. So they have at least 4 seniors on the roster, but the roster is kind of dominated by juniors as well. Because of that, because of the returning experience and just the overall level of talent, I think Illinois Chicago is going to be one of the top 4 teams. I like them a little more than the teams at 3 and 4, only because I think there's players that are just a little more consistent across the board. I think players that I have fewer questions about on Illinois Chicago's roster. Also, I should point out that would be a good team for someone to take over because you probably have some scholarships available in the next 2 years. So recruiting is going to be a lot of fun. You're in the state of Illinois, which has some good players. And UIC, the Fire, that's a team that highlight if you're looking to pick up another team in CBGM. That's one I would think about. Ooey Pooey, IUPUI, Indiana University, Purdue University in Indiana. Went 23-11, best record in the conference last year, made the NIT, went on to the second round of the NIT, even won a game in their postseason. Problem is they lost 2 of their best players, and they only returned 2 starters. They have a really good freshman class coming in. So this roster ends up looking like I think it's going to be better next year than it will be this year, but I think it's still going to be a quality roster. There's still enough talent there that I think Ooey Pooey is going to be up toward the top, definitely in the top half of the conference all year. Number 4 is Oakland. Oakland University is like a stone's throw from where I live in real life and is a program I've always kind of kept an eye on. Always fun to go down to the arena and see games for the Grizzlies. 17-17. They made the CIT last year. They returned 3 starters, including their backcourt. They have 5 seniors on the roster, and they're a very good shooting team. They kind of live by the 3, die by the 3. That's just the style that they play in the game. I think this is a team that I wouldn't be surprised if they're around 500, but they have some really quality wins. I can also see, maybe they struggle a bit in non-conference, get it going in the Horizon League. And in conference play, I think they have the type of athletes that they can compete night in and night out. They have some experience, which I think is incredibly important. Because of that, Oakland, I think, top 4 team in the Horizon League this year. Number 5, Detroit Mercy. They were under 500 last year, but this was the team that made the run in the Horizon League tournament, earned the bid. This is a 1-bid conference, and made it to the NCAA tournament. They did it on the back of one really strong senior performance. They lost that player. They now return 3 starters and have really good bigs. They're really good in the front court. The problem I see with Detroit Mercy, and the reason I don't have them higher, especially as the returning team that earned the bid last year, is because the best players on the roster, there's a bit of redundancy in what they do. They have a lot of players that probably should play only at the 4 and 5, and they're your kind of quintessential bigs, right? Not great athletes, good rebounders, can score inside, not really going to spread the floor. Because of that, I think teams will be able to take advantage of them. Also, the backcourt, I think you can take advantage of them. A lot of Detroit Mercy's success this year is going to be if they can get better defensively. I mean, there was a reason they weren't a 500 team last year. But if the defense can step up, I think they're good enough in the front court that this is a team to watch. In at number 6 and rounding out the top half is Wright State, another user team. They went 17-13 last year. They now return 3 starters, but the player to watch is, I think, a Horizon League Player of the Year candidate, senior center Wes Williams. The offense seems to kind of run through him. He's the top returning scorer and someone that will probably be in the conversation for Conference Player of the Year. He's really special. The rest of the roster is fine. The rest of the roster, you've got a lot of 2-star, 1.5-star players that are going to play because they have some potential for the future. That's fine. That makes them competitive in the Horizon League. But there was nothing stand out on this roster past Wes Williams to really make me think that this is a team that's going to finish in the top 5. If he's great and he finds a running mate, especially someone in that backcourt steps up, I think Wright State's in for a special season. Number 7, I have Robert Morris. The team 7 through 10, you could toss them up in a bag, throw them out in any order, and I would agree with you, because the middle of this conference, I think, is going to be very contentious. I think these teams are really going to beat up on each other. You can also see 3 of the 4 in the 7 through 10 spots all finished with the same record last year, 14-16. Robert Morris, I have a little higher. They returned 3 starters. They lost their entire starting front court, but what they return in the backcourt is probably good enough to keep them in games. The question I'm going to have is early in the season, can they figure out a rotation in the front court? It doesn't look like they're going to have players dominate minutes in the front court spots. So because of that, can they figure out a rotation and have something that returns that can have them be competitive all season? Backcourt's still good enough that I think Robert Morris finishes, again, around 500 like they did last year. 8 is Youngstown State. This is a team, another one I want to highlight. I think this would be a really fun team to take over. The Gwins, they returned 4 starters along with multiple rotation players, but clearly, as I'm looking at it, and I can't say this for sure, but they must have lost their best player, because it doesn't make sense, the returning numbers that they have. It seems that they're missing a pretty big piece of the puzzle. So they must have lost their best player, which is tough, but they return a lot. But they weren't a great team last year. There was nothing about them that really stood out, nothing that they were great at. Because of that, is this a team that's still a year away? Can they take advantage of this cohesion, find the players that they're going to have in the future, and keep building something? Again, I think that's what makes them an interesting rebuild case if you're looking for another team to take over. The Penguins could be one. And given that they have access to recruiting in Ohio and Pennsylvania because of their location, that makes them fun as well. So at number 9, this is a little conjecture on my part, but I think Purdue-Fort Wayne is going to be pretty good this year, coming off a 7-win season. They return all 5 starters, and they only have 1 senior. So this is another team where maybe you're a year away from being a year away, but it could come together this season. I would love to see this as a user team as well, because this is a really interesting roster. I would love to see Purdue-Fort Wayne just play their best 5 players. It's the 5 returning starters, not a terribly young roster. but a team that I think could be really good this year because they have some size and are going to be a decent scoring team. Question is that defense? Can it get any better than what it was last year, where it was a very bad defensive team? Would love to see what Purdue Fort Wayne can do this year. In at 10 is Northern Kentucky, the Norse. They returned 3 starters, only 1 senior on the roster. So this is a young team and one that I think is just developing. They're not there yet, but could be there in the future. They were 14-16 last year. Wouldn't be surprised if they end up with, between 12 and 16 wins again. They're just a team that good enough that, I think they can earn some wins in the Horizon League. But in non-conference, I wouldn't be surprised if they come into conference play with only 2 or 3 wins. In at 11, our third of 4 user teams is Milwaukee. They were 10-21 last year, but they do return 3 starters. They brought in 2 transfers, so the roster is a little thin on who's available this year, and I think that's going to hurt Milwaukee. There's not a ton of talent, so it's kind of a thin rotation. I'm also wondering if Milwaukee, maybe they want to play a bit for the future, just play a really deep bench and see who's there. See if someone shows out and steps up. That probably is the way to play it. I don't know if you're trying to run and gun for the title this year. If you're Milwaukee, maybe you're just trying to, focus on recruiting a bit, focus on just building a foundation and seeing what's there for next year. I know that's what I'm doing, and that's why I put myself at 12. So coming off a 4-win season, worst in the country, we also have 3 projected senior starters. So I wouldn't be surprised if we have a better record than we did last year, but not a winning record. The goal for Cleveland State this year is to not finish in the basement of the Horizon League and to win 10 games. I think we can do that because we're going to have some talent, but a lot of questions in terms of what we get out of some of the younger players on the roster. One of the players I didn't highlight is sophomore forward Kwame Zimmerman. I'm really excited about his future, but he's just not there yet. So we have some raw prospects like him and Garrick Braswell that I want them to earn minutes because I want to see what they're good at and what their future is like. But because they're earning minutes when they're out there, we're probably playing at a bit of a disadvantage. So I have us at 12. I mean, coming off a 4-win year, of course, we're going to be projected to be in the basement. But this is a really fun, competitive league. I think your winner, is probably going to be a barely 20-win team again. But you have some teams that can earn some postseason appearances. This is a 1-bid conference, and it wouldn't surprise me if any of the teams ranked 1 through 9 ended up going to the tourney. This is, again, an opportunity for a lot of teams to just play well, especially in conference play your best basketball late in the year, and you can have your one shining moment. That's what makes leagues like this fun. I think that's why so many of us took on a rebuild in the offseason. But my rebuild, I hate to say it, might be toughest of all. Hope you enjoyed episode 1, this preview of the Horizon League, as well as this preview of the rebuild in front of me with the Vikings. This is Revamp the Vikings, my CBGM Cleveland State rebuild. If you liked it, go ahead and like the video, comment, let me know what you think. If you are coming from CBGM, would love to know what you'd like to see in the future. I can try to preview other leagues or other teams for you as we get into the season. I'd love to talk a bit about how the season is going. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell so you're the first to see these videos. I'll be talking to you soon. This is Maize. Hope you enjoyed it.